thank you so much for coming to this third installment. We're super excited to have you, and welcome to the Project Kickoff session of the COVID-19 Response Innovation Lab. More and more obvious that time is of the essence, and we're very grateful that you're willing to contribute to this incredibly crucial effort. We've been growing very steadily. Over 200 members are now involved in our community, and over 140 members have signed up for projects, which is absolutely impressive today. First, we're going to have Annika start to discuss the role of the team leader, as it's a very important first step for getting these projects rolling.
Thank you, Josh. So just to one step before, I think a few of you are actually new joiners who might not have found a team yet. So we just also wanted to ask you to have a look at the tab 3 of the Access spreadsheet, like the public one that is circulating. And please, if you have not done so and really would like to participate, just add your name on this third tab to the list and to the team you would like to take part in, so we know who is part of which team. And it really helps us, it just helps us to keep track of what you guys are doing and how you have been have grouped yourself together. And in case your team is not yet active or you didn't find each other yet, just let us know, and we will get in touch with you individually and try to help you there to get started. And then once your team is in place, it would be really great if you could assign a team leader and indicate that role also on the Access spreadsheet in the respective column. And it doesn't mean, we just wanted to make clear, it doesn't mean in any way that the team leader is some superior role or so within the team or does have authority over the other team members, not at all. It's really just supposed to be the person that has the most time to allocate to the project, because he or she is currently a student and doesn't have a full-time job at the moment. Just the main point of contact for us as channel managers to set up calls, to check in what's going on. That's really it. And the team leader can of course also be 2 people or 3 people, and the role can also change over time. So it can start with 1 person in your team and be handed over to another. All of that is obviously possible. Yeah, basically, yeah, that's pretty much it. And so handing over to Julieta.
Thank you, Annika. So we wanted to share with you that we had a call with Mark Hershenson and Ian Taylor from PRBC, and they shared some great insight regarding on how to best support the teams and your needs moving forward. So we wanted to share a couple of takeaways that we had from that meeting. In general, from their experience, they say that in the first 10 to 12 weeks, teams are usually dedicated to build and come up with a strategy and a product, essentially answering the question what is your story and what makes your product different from what's out there. So just be mindful of time management and expectations. Specifically in terms of team tracking, they suggested that we should come up with some operational metrics, probably tailored by around the 6 categories that we have, but those metrics would essentially answer the question what does success mean for these teams? So moving forward, probably this is something that we are going to explore for team tracking. In terms of how to keep momentum, they also said that this was probably one of the biggest things that we need to take care of. Especially, they suggested that this could become a challenge given that we're all working remote and that some of us have met for the first time in the past couple of weeks. So basically what they said was just to keep it flexible, expect team reallocation, and probably also expect team mergings or spin-offs from projects. So that's what we're going to do moving forward. And finally, they also suggested that we could arrange for mentors, among faculty members, to provide office hours for the teams. And we're definitely going to work on that. And something really exciting was that they also offered PRBC as willing to provide office hours for the team. So that was really unexpected, and we were happy to see that they were thrilled to also help with the initiative. So these were all really valuable insights that we had, especially around on how to, as we said before, support the teams, which is especially what the small organizer group is looking to do in the next couple of weeks. So I turn it over to Josh now.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much, Julieta. Next up, Nancy is going to talk about some of the channels in Slack that are very critical to this effort and ways that you can get involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh and Annika and Julieta and Daniel for helping organize this effort. There's a couple of, as many of you know, we just started a new Slack channel. There used to be one in sort of the GSB 2020, and now we have a lot of members who are no longer part of the GSB who are also part of this initiative, and we wanted to make sure all of you have access to it. So there's, so first things first, if you haven't joined the new COVID Slack, please go ahead and see a link in any of the channels that you part of. You on any of the other organizers to get inside that. And one of the big exciting parts about this initiative is all of you are part of this because you want to help with COVID. And I understand, and we all understand, that there are many projects that are going. You might be excited about several of them, or you might feel like you can support another project even though you aren't on the project yourself. So we've created a couple of channels in the Slack, and one of them is called Support. And in Support, this is a channel for you guys to sort of explicitly sort of say like, hey, I know this particular group. You can also sort of make, so for example, we've brought in some speakers like Milana, Mike, there's many other potential speakers we can bring in. And if any of you know folks who would like to contribute in more of a sort of a speaker or advisory role, that would be a great channel to bring it up. There's also a speakers form that we circulated after the meeting last time, and it was great. A lot of you filled it out, and we're hoping that more of you will fill it out. So please fill that out if you haven't, and it's a great chance for us what it is that we can do to help you in terms of finding more advisors for your projects. And lastly, we also have a channel called Looking For. Looking For is a channel for folks who for you to basically share what kinds of people you would either like to have as more of an advisory capacity in your team, or sort of see any other resource that we can help provide. It'd be ours. And then there's also a workforce channel, which has more general discussions surrounding folks working on projects. And if you haven't joined any of those 3 Slack channels, please go ahead and do that. And it would be super helpful for us to be able to better help you with your projects. And I think with that, Daniel, do you want to talk a bit about how to get on the Slack in the first place and the sheet, etc.?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think in general, what we're trying to get across is that we're here to help you out as much as possible, and we want to add value any way we can. So the Slack is the best way we found to do that. So as Nancy and a couple of other people have talked about, we have very diverse channels depending on your interest and the category that you want to get involved with, depending on if you need extra support or if you're looking for specific team members. So the Slack channel, we can send the link. I'll send the link on the chat right during the call in case anybody's not part of it yet. And please also use the Slack channel as a way to communicate with us directly. It's myself, Annika, Josh, Julieta, and Nancy are there to answer any questions that you guys might have. And please connect with us and also share with the others what you guys have been doing, how you guys have been progressing, because we want to see what impact we can have with this. So the Slack is one avenue, and then the other avenue is the spreadsheet that Annika talked about. So please add your names to the list if you haven't, add any projects that you already might have, set yourself up on a team, and figure out who the channel moderator is in that category. And please message us directly if you have any questions or if we can help you out in any way, because that's what we're here for. So I'll send out the link to the Slack in a second in case any of you guys haven't joined yet, and I'll throw it back to you, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, and one really, really important part of this whole thing is getting involved and getting connected. So after this call, if you haven't already, please do send a quick email to your team leader. You can find their email in the other part of the spreadsheet in the first tab. Likewise, team leader, if you haven't already, start to organize meetings for your idea and your project, just so that we can get the ball rolling. And everyone's going to be really happy to receive these emails and make sure that like everyone is kind of on board and excited about things. All right. With that, I'm very, very happy to announce that Professor Milana Trounce, who is an advisor to this initiative and also a clinical professor in the School of Medicine, director of biosecurity at Stanford, and one of the world's leading experts on pandemics, is going to give a presentation on COVID-19 and the key insights into needs, opportunities, and challenges going forward with this pandemic. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Professor Milana Trounce.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Josh and the team, for having me. This is exciting for me, especially as it came out of GSB, since I am a GSBer myself, believe it or not, in addition to, although medicine is kind of my main thing, but I came out of the GSB as well. So thank you, Josh. I thought that I could start off by giving you some background on pandemics in general. And because, you know, COVID-19 pandemic is one of the pandemics, many pandemics that you guys will experience in your lifetime, with this being the current one. Can you all see my screen? Can you see my slides?
Not at the moment.
Okay. All right. All right, maybe I can, let's see. Do you want to try sharing that back, Josh? Or?
Let's see.
Yeah. Anyway,
I should be.
let's see.
What happens when you try to share screen?
Oh, let me try this. Okay, sorry guys, technical glitch. Let me try this. Share screen. There you go. Okay.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you.
Okay, did that work?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, I'm not, you know, great with Zoom, but I'm learning. Okay. All right. So let's go over the infectious disease threat, just to put everything into context. So when we talk about infectious disease, there are numerous, although everybody's very focused on COVID-19, there are actually numerous threats from infectious organisms. And we talk about the spectrum of deliberate, accidental, and natural threats, with COVID-19 being one. And also something to never forget is obviously the economic impact. You know, you guys are in business school, you know about that. And also the threat to the agriculture and livestock from infectious organisms more broadly. Again, to put everything in the context, infectious disease has been a powerful force in human evolution. In fact, as much as we talk about wars and violence, 20 times more people, roughly, died historically from infectious organisms than from all causes of violence or war, believe it or not. So this thing is powerful. Took out half the population of Europe during plague. One of the more recent examples of the pandemics is the Spanish flu influenza that happened in the 1918, and that took down life expectancy in the US to about 40 years old. And this is just something that happened, you know, 100 years ago. But this is something that people talk a lot about now. When we talk about pandemics, people a lot of times talk about flus. And the reason I mention this is basically, this is not something that infectious organisms is not something that can be eradicated. Anyway, not all of them. Flu can be eradicated because the natural animal reservoirs for it are in many mammals and other organisms. So you can't kill all the pigs and, you know, all the birds, etc. And with influenza, as well as with coronaviruses, the virus constantly mutates and reassorts itself. So this is why we get recurrent events. And I'm not going to go into the details of this. I know you guys want to kind of hear things that are a little more practical, but you can't understand pandemics without understanding human to animal transmission. And this is these slides are referring to swine flu, MERS, and Ebola, all of which came from animals to humans. So going to coronaviruses now, people talk, you guys will hear about, people talk about SARS. This is also coronavirus. That's an outbreak that happened in 2003, took out about 8,000 lives, and killed about 1 in 10. Also, there was MERS pandemic, or that was not a pandemic, that was an outbreak. but that took about over 2,000 lives and killed about 3 or 4 people in 10. So high mortality rate from coronaviruses. And by the way, coronavirus is the kind of virus that causes common colds about 20-30% of the time every year in human population. So bottom line is we see coronaviruses, they circulate, these kinds of things can happen anytime. The origins are through animals, starts in bats and then has, some other animals as an intermediary, whether it's camels or opossums or other types of animals. This is just data from SARS and MERS. I'm going through these slides very quickly. So just as of today, with COVID-19, we're at over 1 million cases globally and close to 300,000 cases in the US, with mortality reported all across the board at about 2%. There's a big range in mortality, and we can have lots of Q&A on that, but I won't belabor these points. In the US, we've had close to 4,000 deaths at this point. So one thing to understand about pandemics more broadly, since you guys are starting ventures to fight COVID-19, but this is maybe relevant for you since COVID-19 is not the only pandemic and you kind of want to help plan for the future. Bottom line is we've unwittingly engineered our society to be more susceptible to pandemics than ever before due to the issues like urbanization, globalization, conflict, climate change. Actually, people travel and people come in contact like they never have before. So basically, if people are closer together and there are more of us and people travel, that obviously facilitates the spread of these infectious organisms, and that's just biology. Also, in many countries, the healthcare infrastructure is inadequate, and that makes the whole, trying to contain the epidemic very tough. Airplanes are being the super vector, billion cross-border travelers, global food network, world traffic container doubled since 1997. You see massive interconnectivity in the world. Numerous people and scientific groups have modeled these, and there are clear implications for epidemic spread, even via the global aviation network. How do we see this play out in practice? For example, Ebola. There was a big Ebola scare in 2014, 2016. Tens of thousands of people died. Why did that happen? Ebola is not a new organism. This is something that originated was first discovered rather, not originated, in 1976. And actually there have been over 100 Ebola outbreaks in Africa between 1976 to 2013. And none of them you heard about because generally it involved less than 100 people, remote village, a bunch of people in the village died, nobody traveled outside the village, you never heard of it. All of a sudden this thing with Ebola blows up because people travel from village to village and then people travel globally. So this is just as an example of why we are more vulnerable to pandemics now in general, not just with COVID. And this is just the data to support this. Also, there's changing patterns of natural spread, for example, with climate change. And this is illustrative of Zika. And the reason I have this slide up is to show that with climate change, mosquitoes travel, mosquitoes carry disease, and now we see disease and tropical diseases in areas which are not traditionally considered tropical. Like, we see tropical diseases in Florida and Texas and places like that. And this is going to continue. And we've seen this with Zika, dengue, which is a nasty bug. It's about 30 times more prevalent in the world now than it was even a couple of decades ago. You can get it up to 4 times. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all the details, but things are spreading and we're more at risk. Same with chikungunya, you guys have heard. Again, this spread, literally in the last 15 years. And quick point about disasters, because what we're dealing with right now is essentially infectious disease disaster. So people always have this concept of, oh, you know, the federal government will come and rescue us. And, you know, they do have resources and they are helpful, and they try hard, but ultimately disasters are generally local, especially something like an infectious disease disaster, because the issue is if you have an earthquake or some kind of event involving war or hurricanes, these are more local. You know, the rest of the world, the rest of the country can send you resources. Now with this thing, with pandemics, everybody's at risk, even if even places which are not currently critical right now are worried and are planning for critical stage at some point, so they may be less likely to share resources. So this is just something to keep in mind as you think about your ventures. So disasters are local, and you know, this is kind of how the requests for assistance flow. You know, you have the incident command system, and the local public health departments request support from the state, and then they request the support from the feds, and then the resources flow down to state, you know, local, etc. And there are numerous, something again to keep in mind here. You know, I know most of you guys are going to business school. You know, this is government. You know, this is not just business. Although business can be massively helpful, but there's a lot of you have to work closely with the government, or at least, you know, think about how you might want to work closely with the government, because they're in everything. And a lot of times, you know, in order for you to be successful as a business, you're gonna have to coordinate closely with them. For example, Google's Verily. You think Google, right? A very technical company. They've developed actually community testing sites in very close coordination, actually, with the funding from the federal government, and with close coordination with the state, with the local public health departments. And that's, you know, that's Google. And so, you know, this, you know, just to give you an example, you know, they figured out, well, how do we test? How do we scale up the testing for COVID-19? And this is just something that's happened, you know, in the last month. Another point with mass casualty care, we've seen this in Italy. You know, we haven't quite seen this, you know, where we are around Stanford. You know, we have this under control. But bottom line, you know, we switch in the emergency room. I'm an ER doc. We switch from the standard care to crisis care, where we put all the resources for one individual, to where we put we step back and we think about population health and how we do the most good for the greatest number of people. And this is when these kinds of rationing decisions might come from. Well, who will get the ventilator? Is it the 100-year-old who might die, most likely, or is it the 30-year-old who is critical now but is very likely to survive? And so, and then you also get, you might get military involved. This is exactly what happened with Ebola. You know, they did this with China in Wuhan. Military built hospitals, 2 hospitals in a week. So you have to think about kind of more global picture with all of this as well. I mention it because I think, you know, this might be new to some of you. Again, you go from regional crisis management to this being national, to involving the United Nations, the WHO, and the military. So now I will switch very quickly and basically actually take you through the briefing I did for at the request of George Shultz, who was a former US Secretary of State. I briefed Condoleezza Rice and George Shultz and a number of others at Hoover, which is a kind of policy think tank at Stanford. This was a year ago. And I wrote a paper on potential pandemics, but I have to say, you know, this is as applicable now as it was a year ago, because it basically shows you, you know, why this issue is important, and outlines of how we might potentially respond, and outlines kind of where some of the directions should be, where they have been historically, and where they should be going now. And so I'll take you through this very quickly, but feel free, if you just Google potential pandemics Bookman, it will pop up the actual paper. And this is basically a summary of what I will talk about in the next few minutes. So every time pandemics happen, everybody thinks, oh, drugs and vaccines. And very classically, you know, there's all this massive outpouring of resources, and people are literally trying to throw billions of dollars into drug development and vaccine development. And that goes for the US government and for, you know, other places, both private and public. The problem is with drugs, you're not going to have a drug in time to treat this disease. You might be able to repurpose some drugs, and this is what you see, that's what you see in the news about the hydrochloroquine and some others, but it's unlikely we will develop a brand new drug in time to deal with this pandemic. Now, with vaccines, the situation is a little bit better, but it's not going to be, it's going to be at least 12 to 18 months before we have the vaccine for COVID. These kinds of things. But at least at this point in time. So have drugs of defense, gates, etc. around this, but it's tough. And the similar thing with vaccine. Capacity, you know, bottom line, very limited. You know, had to break out disaster tent for several years in a row at Stanford during a regular flu season. Fortunately, we've since moved to a new hospital where we have a lot more space and we're much better equipped. So hopefully we won't need to do that, but who knows? And by the way, this is very similar to a lot of other places around the country. Maintaining hospital beds is expensive, and it's not just a matter of physical beds, it's also a matter of having them staffed, you know, having enough nurses and respiratory technicians and doctors to actually take care of the patients in these spaces. You can't scale that, you know, overnight. So not sufficient surge capacity. Also for infectious disease disaster, COVID is one. There is a ton of personal protective equipment, and that huge strain on the resources as well. And as you guys are hearing all across the news, is that a number of places around the country and the world are essentially running out of personal protective equipment. So actually we were thinking at Stanford about ways of reusing them. Basically right now we're figuring out ways of how do you sterilize them and how do you reuse them. For example, that goes with N95s and other things. So that's an active area of kind of interest, and there's a number of trying to figure this out, either by manufacturing face shields or trying to figure out ways to maybe have UV lights, sterilizations of personal protective equipment and such. So that's one area kind of innovation for innovation space. Wanted to talk quick how COVID-19. So the traditional way of controlling infectious disease is through public health measures, which are basically identifying the people who are sick, trying to identify all their contacts and contacts of contacts and isolating them. This is a containment strategy. This worked, by the way, for SARS, this worked for MERS, and this worked for Ebola. It's not going to work for COVID-19 because we're in the in containment mode now. So there's so much asymptomatic spread. It's difficult with the testing. So now this requires a change in approach where we move from traditional pillars of public health to essentially behavior change. And this implies a behavior change. This is what you see with quarantines, with orders, with prohibiting people aggregations, in public spaces, restricting socialization. Basically, basically it's very key right now, as you all see, to interrupt transmission of infectious organisms. And this is what it's all about. This slide is referring to the fact that with SARS, the containment strategy worked, but with this, with a lot of other outbreaks in the past, containment strategy did not work. So we go back to the tried and true methods. And this is how they controlled Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago. They didn't have drugs, they didn't have vaccines, but boy, they really went for the isolations. So quarantine is derived from the Italian word quaranta, referring to the fact that back during the plague outbreak, ships were required to stay at sea for 40 days before being allowed offshore. And by that time, people who are meant to die would die, and people who survived were no longer infectious. So this is exactly one of the methods which was used to control the Spanish flu pandemic. It's non-medical. So with Spanish flu, actually, there's a lot of data on the CDC website of how these kinds of community mitigation measures, and this is what you can Google and search under, community mitigation measures, were used, and they were found to be useful to the point that they saved a lot of lives. And they did entail the loss of civil liberties in the US. And this is a hard pill for a country to swallow. So how we approach this is a little bit different. But the first line of defense were educational campaigns regarding hygiene, banning common cups and utensils, educating people on proper ways of coughing. And the second line of these community mitigation measures were things like what we see now: closing of schools, restrictions of large gatherings, isolations and quarantines. And there is data to suggest that cities and counties which implemented social control measures within a few days of the outbreak did far better than cities who didn't do that. For example, St. Louis implemented these measures within 2 days, and they had 1/8 the number of deaths from Spanish flu compared to Philadelphia. 1/8. That's a lot of lives saved with these interventions alone. And this is non-medical. This data is available on the CDC website. So cities without these control measures fared much worse. And something to keep in mind with COVID-19 now, as was Spanish flu, beware of the second wave. The question begs itself, when do you come out? When do you stop these measures? And everybody's now asking, well, what do you think about, how long this is going to take? With coronaviruses, generally, and this is what we've seen with SARS and MERS and others, they significantly decreased over the summer. So I'm hoping over the summer we'll see far less of them, just due to the seasonality alone. But, generally they start recirculating in the fall again and into the winter time. So with Spanish flu pandemic, with flu, it's somewhat similar. And there was a second wave of Spanish flu, which actually killed a bunch of people, more people than the first wave. So this is something we have to be mindful of with COVID-19. These kinds of measures, and this is where we come to kind of technology portion. So I like to because people are familiar with this. Basically, if you think about cybersecurity, if all cybersecurity was to try to debug computers which have been infected by viruses, that's not a strategy, right? A lot of our strategies for cybersecurity is to build firewalls, right? It is to prevent our electronic devices from being infected in the first place. And this is what, we're all about now with cyber. I think this should be what we're all about in biology. I know people talk about drugs and things like that, but I think, thinking about this and kind of this framework is very helpful. Now, how do we accomplish this for biosecurity? This is essentially, you have to think about ways of interrupting the spread. And, infectious organisms, they don't spread magically. They require particles, right? These particles travel from point A to point B, and this is how they infect. And they might, they travel from person to person, but they also have intermediate places where they are on fomites. They might be in the air, they might be in the surfaces. So anything you can do to kind of reduce these infections, to interrupt this transmission is critical. How might this look like? I think, for example, UVC lights, the use of UVC lights is underused in the US. We know for a fact that UVC light kills coronaviruses, as well as, by the way, virtually every other infectious organism. You know, the dose might be different for them, but for coronaviruses, it's a relatively smaller dose. So I think this is underused. We have to be careful with UVC lights because they do cause skin cancer and cataracts. So you don't want to be frying people with them, but it's massively useful if you can figure out the use and settings where people can be absent for a period of time. I mean, and this could be as little as a few minutes even, or a bit longer if your intensity is lower. So that's one idea. Kind of self-quarantine and protective equipment. This is what people to self-quarantine easier. How do you, any kind of way that you can get people prepared with their own personal protective equipment and just make their life, just enable them to self-quarantine. That's another kind of innovation space. You know, people are stuck at home. There's even, you know, that could be anything from mental health issues to kind of physical supplies of food and equipment, to ability to educate and work from home. Also, there are technology things, technology points like temperature and humidity. I know if we can all make saunas out of our workspaces and houses and universities, we're going to be done with coronaviruses, because sauna type environments, you know, high heat and very high humidity, that's what kills coronaviruses. So anything you can do as far as using that is helpful. Also, anything that can accelerate and enhance ventilation in rooms to get these infectious particles out is helpful. It is because it is spread by aerosols, and it can stay in the air in the rooms for a while. Not for a long time, but it can stay for a while. So anything around filtration or improved aeration of the rooms and improved ventilation may be helpful. Things like touchless surfaces. Again, these things are spread by fomites, meaning that, you know, whatever people touch can contain the virus. Depending on the type of the, you know, is it worth for door handles or copper computer screens or copper phones? Because on copper, the coronaviruses, you know, stay for up to 4 to 8 hours, whereas on steel, they stay for several days. I mean, this is just one example. You know, should we warm our devices? Because that's what would kill coronaviruses. I'm just throwing crazy ideas out there to get you guys thinking creatively about this. Of course, this is what you have, but you can innovate around, you know, crowds. A lot of people, conferences online now, museums online, concerts online, etc. Optimize store hours, decrease person-to-person interaction, everything, telecommute, telemedicine, you know, teleeducation, everything. And of course, you know, hand washing and hygiene is massive. Coronaviruses get killed very effectively by simple soap and detergent. You don't need alcohol-based. You don't need any kind of anything fancy. Just get a plain soap, you know, wash your hands. That's going to kill it. Or wash the surfaces with these kinds of, with any kind of soap type detergent-based products. So transmission, we talked about interrupting transmission. Basically as one of the main pillars. How does, just a quick slide to show you guys how it is transmitted. As you guys have heard, it is through droplets in the air. I would say this is actually more of a minor mode of transmission. As much as people are talking about N95s and as much as everybody's fixated on masks, it's actually more of a minor way as far as numbers, as far as how the coronavirus is actually spread. It is primarily through direct or indirect transfer. Direct transfer meaning you cough on your own hand, you shake somebody's hand, so that somebody's touching their eyes or mouth, boom, they're infected. That's direct transfer. Indirect transfer, you cough on a table, somebody touches that table, they touch their eyes or mouth, they're infected. So so basically interrupting that is key. Note that COVID can survive on fomites for varying lengths of time. For example, it survives on cardboard for only up to 24 hours, but metal and plastic surfaces up to several days. Copper, 4 to 8 hours. Air, a few hours. How do you reduce the risk in the workplace? That's also a possible area for innovation of how you think about this creatively. How do you encourage your sick employees to stay home? How do you encourage them to get adherence to hand hygiene? This is something that businesses are really interested in. You know, how do you essentially keep your business operations going without going into complete crisis mode? How do you protect your employees? So how do you get them, you know, not sick? How do you get them to wash their hands, telecommute, you know, maybe some kind of clever ways of maybe limiting, if they have to go to the office, maybe do it in shifts, or do it in ways where they can maintain contact between each other. Communication strategy is huge. So the goal now, as I mentioned, you know, we're past containment, and the goal is now to flatten the curve. And the reason why that's important is basically, and this is why a lot of people are staying home, and it's all about, you keep hearing about flattening the curve. And the reason why it's important, because you don't want to get to the point when hospitals are overwhelmed or essentially unable to provide medical care, because that's when people die, much more likely to die. If you don't have the respirator, if you're critical, you can die. So it's important to flatten that curve and basically match supply to demand in the healthcare setting. And this is kind of what the public healthcare professionals are going for right now. And we need to buy time essentially while we're awaiting vaccines, or and also without even vaccines, while people are developing immunity in the population. So, and this is where the analogy to the cyber doesn't work as well, is actually as population builds immunity, the viruses start spreading much slower. And this is when it becomes far easier to control them. So this will happen at some point, it'll just take time. Many experts believe, you know, as much as over half of the population of the US will get infected over the next year and a half. And after that, you'll start getting herd immunity and the virus will slow down. And that's even in the absence of any drugs or vaccines. We've talked about that. Be careful where you get your news. There's a ton of fake news out there, and a lot of, not even just purposefully fake news, but just a lot of misinformation of people misinterpreting the data. So I like to go to Johns Hopkins Center for Security site. This is, they also have this daily COVID map where they post cases, as well as go to your CDC, WHO, and also New York Times and Economist, I found have a pretty good scientific accuracy as far as reporting. But be careful where you get your info. So, you know, this is my last slide. Want to finish with a quote by Prince Otto von Bismarck. Politics is the art of the possible, the calculated science of survival. And the response by the professor, survival owes little to the art of politics, but everything to the calculated application of science. And I think the true answer is somewhere in between. Basically, policy people have to work with technology people, have to work with business people, have to work with healthcare professionals, and come up with most optimal solutions. So as you guys are working on your ventures, I think interdisciplinary kind of hat is important in order to kind of develop, so that to prevent you guys from developing very siloed approaches that don't work necessarily in the bigger context. So that's my 2 cents. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Milana. This has been really amazing. Yeah, super insightful. Awesome. Yeah, and to get some a bit of a sense about some of the ventures that are going on in this same line of thinking, we have a couple of individuals who have come up already with and have been working on some very well matured projects that have a lot of potential. So the first individual that I would like to introduce is Sydney. So Sydney is working on a project called COVID Now. Over to you, Sydney.
It's called COVID Watch, but close enough. And COVID Watch is a project that's trying to use contact tracing to figure out and alert people of when they've been exposed or possibly been exposed to coronavirus. So the idea is that a bunch of people download either our app or other similar contact tracing apps. We're working on creating standards so that they can all interface with each other. And we estimate that if in a area about 60% of people download these apps, it'll be enough, thank you for pulling that up, to make the difference between the virus sort of accelerating its spread or slowing to the point of being contained, not overwhelming the healthcare system. And that's actually, I said we estimate, that's actually an estimate from Oxford, independent of us. And so the idea is we built this app. We are very focused on security, which some of the other contact tracing apps aren't. We're doing it mostly through Bluetooth. And we would really love if anybody wants to join. We especially need people with legal expertise, Android and iOS development expertise, and security and experience with Bluetooth would be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is really exciting. Next up, we have Matteo, and he's going to share his project on 3D printing.
Hey, thanks, Josh. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about an ongoing project that I got involved in a little over a year ago. So the company is called Make, and the idea is a decentralized 3D printing network. So I was able to add the founder, Nishat Rustagi, who's a close friend of mine, to this call. I'll let him speak a little bit more about what we're doing with Make and the original purpose of the project, and now how it's being applied to coronavirus response and accelerating the production of PPE and other supplies that are essential to the response here. Nishat, I don't know if you're on to talk a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, hi. So thanks for the introduction, Matteo. And so, yeah, we are building a manufacturing workflow platform. I've been doing this for 2 years, and I've been involved in 3D printing for, I guess, 5 years now. So essentially what we have done is we have built a network of industrial 3D printers and CNC machines across America. And we are digitizing manufacturing at the same time decentralizing it. So we're pretty much like we're still in the early stages of development of the platform. You can check us out on makerstage.com. That's makerstage.com. So at this stage, we're uniquely positioned to actually scale a lot of manufacturing for PPE, such as face shields, DIY mask, DIY snorkeling, fits for ventilators. So on a daily basis, I'm getting inquiries to print upwards of 5,000 parts per week from various different clients or organizations, including Lockheed Martin, which is now working with us. So yeah, so I believe that we are very uniquely positioned in scaling manufacturing of things really quickly. And we have a very elastic supply side, so we can be printing, I guess, 25,000 pieces of standard PPE parts per week. So, and at industrial scale. So, yeah, and I think we be happy to contribute to something like this and be of any help. And Matteo can also go over like the kind of people we are looking to join our team or help us with this project. Yeah. I'm gonna leave it over to you.
I'll just add on to what Nishat said. So originally I had posted about Make thinking that maybe we could find people that wanted to print supplies, but I've actually been pretty excited and honored to have so much interest from the Stanford community to get involved. So, you know, we're looking for people that have the ability to help us on the sales or business development side, or engineering, helping us build out this platform, make it more automated. You know, Nishat said that we could do up to 25,000 parts per week, but that's really taking into account that this is pretty much a 2 full-time employee effort plus myself. So I think if we can build out this team to help with the COVID-19 response, that this is a really strong way to help with the immediate you know, gap in terms of demand and supply for PPE.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, this is super exciting. All right, up next we have Sam Gorman. He's going to talk about his platform Close, which is specifically focused on statistics and news.
Hey everyone, good to talk to you. Let me share my screen real quick. Actually, before I do, I'll tell you a little bit about what we're up to. So like Josh mentioned, we're working on Close. What this is what we're framing as a free tool for California residents to stay updated on key events, both in changes in statistics and local news in their area. Essentially, people are overwhelmed right now by the amount of news going their way. And there are also, a lot of stuff gets lost in the noise, right? For example, clear statistics like how many counts are in my area? How much did that increase? What do I need to know? What kind of actions do I need to take? So we've been developing a platform to help think about that problem. I'll show you a demo. In terms of timing of this should actually be released tomorrow. So still very much hard at work trying to get this out, but let me show you what this looks like on a phone. So for example, it's a clear kind of, we start with a map of California based off of your current location. And then you can just kind of quickly tap around and see for your area how crowded are cases and what's really going on in this area right now in a clear way. And then once you're here, this is, for example, your county. You can see, all right, well, this was about 2 weeks ago, but in this example, 284 confirmed cases, it's up by 52. Okay, and then here's a set of local news outlets, reputable local news outlets that we verified on our end that we're then displaying to you for like kind of a key local updates within your area. And then if you're curious, you can look around other areas as well. So this is available on mobile. This is also available on web. So we built out a web equivalent that looks like this for users to be able to access sort of platform agnostic. And you can see that's very much in development here. That should be live by the end of tomorrow night. So how could you get involved? Well, first, would love your thoughts. Feedback is always helpful. But on a higher level, we're really looking for 2 types of people to be able to help out and really grow this to residents across California. 1, people who consider themselves, I'd like to say creative, right? You're probably someone, maybe you illustrate, maybe you make art, maybe you design, maybe you write things, but you find power in creating new mediums. I think we'd be interested in talking to you. Really just thinking about how can we kind of employ some of that creative toolkit to spread this app in creative ways across various communities in California. The second type of person is someone who is excited by growth. So in an ideal sense, we can really share this free public health resource. We're just a group of students, right, who want to make a difference. So we'd love to collaborate with anyone who wants to help this grow. And I'd say, especially if you're excited by word of mouth growth, by more unconventional ways of really spreading tools. In an ideal sense, we can reach, I'd say, like millions of California residents in a time where a lot of people are overwhelmed and people are really just looking for clarity and are looking for a kind of a clear daily statistic that they can trust. We pull all of this data from local departments of health, and we don't make any pretense to interpret or create any of this data ourselves. We're really just trying to repackage it in an accessible, well-designed format and reach a lot of people across California. So I'll put my email in the chat if you want to reach out. Thanks for letting me talk, Josh.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Sam. This is super, super cool. All right, finally, we have Andrew, and he's going to be presenting his website for mutual aid.
Thanks, Josh. I think what you guys are doing is amazing. Again, props. I really liked, Sam, what you just presented, because my website just conceptually is the same thing, but for mutual aid is how to make sense of noise, because there's power in clarity, there's power in design and succinctness. So I'm going to tell you 3 things today. One is the high level concept and what the gap we're trying to fill. 2 is about the project itself, so I'm going to show you what my project is. And 3, what's next for us and what kind of people we're looking for or how we can help. So a high level concept of this is that everything has changed, as you guys know. Fighting COVID is not just government's duty or responsibility, it's an all of society thing, right? Society has to do something. Now, the government is going to be the primary response vehicle for this, along with the private sector, with the free market, but there are going to be gaps, and that is where civil society comes in. On a higher level, we aim to help civil society channel resources to places that need it the most. So one is how to make sure healthcare systems stay afloat during this crisis, and 2 is how to really help our vulnerable communities. So where I'm from in Malaysia, there's a real risk of marginalized peoples dying and starving in this, because a lot of people are wage workers, right? Wage laborers. They work day to day, they earn that day's wage, they buy food and eat and survive off of that. We have 200,000 refugees and 3 million migrant workers. When you have a lockdown, that's not going to happen. And when you don't have savings, you're going to starve. How do you make sure people don't starve and channel resources from civil society towards this? Now, the context is that civil society is resilient and proactive. You see this in a lot of mutual aid initiatives and projects popping up. But again, there is this problem of noise. There's so much information out there. How do you make sense of it, right? Essentially, the gap is that search costs are really, really high. And the implication is that some well-meaning citizen or the average well-meaning citizen finds it hard to act because of this confusion and might be dissuaded from taking action. So our solution is a mutual aid platform that's user-friendly. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. It's called kitajagakita.com. It is essentially a one-stop platform for all mutual aid initiatives in Malaysia. And we made it specifically so it's intuitive to use. So one use case is that you're a well-meaning citizen and you want to help. How do you do that? You click want to help. If you need help, you click need help. So we've listed and compiled all the initiatives and making it easy for the user to search based on objective. Do I want to help vulnerable communities? Do I want to help frontliners in the medical system? Do I need help? So let's say if you want to help vulnerable communities, you click this. Do I want to donate money, food, volunteer? Do I want to help migrants and refugees, women and children, So in a very intuitive and user-friendly way, focusing on design, we make it easy for citizens to channel their help to civil society initiatives to help the most vulnerable, to help medical frontliners, and also to ask for help. So we think this is really powerful. It is, when we launched this 2 weeks ago, and we have a couple of successes. So one, in terms of users and visitors, we've had 35,000 visitors in the last 2 weeks. We have had substantial media traction. We are also the main hashtag for all civil society initiatives in Malaysia. So we're very proud of that. There is leverage in that. So corporates have come to us to say, hey, what's up? We want to help in this. Do you have specific initiatives that you can direct us towards, and how we can best help? And 2, we're very replicable. This is a very, I would say, a low-tech solution to the problem. It's not AI, it's not this. It's really having the right design to help channel information and resources. So the proudest accomplishment of kitajagakita.com is that our very own classmate here, Thilo Braun, has launched his German platform based on our platform and design. And it's launching today, and I'm wondering if he wants to speak about that later. But we're so happy that he's done that. To us, it's a confirmation that our model is replicable across communities and countries. I think another classmate of ours Joy is thinking of launching a similar platform in New York, and that's great. We are also using our leverage to educate people. So within communities who need help, who are the most vulnerable, we publish blog posts, for example, to say, actually, if you look at all of them, refugees, stateless, migrant workers are probably the most important because they don't benefit from the government's safety net. So we're trying to educate civil society to help them make better choices. What's next for us is really that we want to see our, we think we've hit on something, and it's the right design. And we'd like this to be replicated across communities and countries. So if any of this is at all resonant with you, if this strikes a chord, please talk to us. Talk to me, talk to Tilo, who's just launched his in the last week or so. So Tilo's amazing. I'm so impressed with his organizational skills. Two, what we can offer you is the ideation. We can talk you through the design choices that we've made. For example, we decided against sharing information because that's not our comparative advantage, right? One of the choices was should we also have another part that says this is the right way to deal with COVID, this is the right way to self-isolate. We decided to scope down, and that was the right choice, for example. So we're happy to do that. We're also happy to offer you introductory plug and play templates, so you can hit the ground running, right? The real work in this is not so much the website development, it's more how do you categorize and find the various initiatives and make it in a way that's relevant and intuitive to civil society. So we think we've hit on something. We're very happy that this has been replicated across countries. And let us know if this strikes a chord, and together we'll help people reclaim their agency and power in this crisis by helping other people. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. This is super, super exciting. And I do encourage you, if this is, like Andrew said, if it's resonant, please reach out to them. This is a super impactful project. I feel like it should be sort of a front page of the internet for a respective community. So yeah, awesome. All right. And next up, we are going to be updating you on some of the recent developments. We're going to be featuring several projects like these, whoever wants publicity essentially, on our website, which is going to be hosted at responselab.stanford.edu. We are currently building the website, and so I'd like to deeply thank Rachel Grau and Camille Ali for helping to do that. And likewise, we're going to have the opportunity for members to also be on the website to be affiliated. So we'll be sending out a form for that later. So if you're a member and you want to sort of be more involved and be on the website, for people to reach out to you, or for you to reach out to people, etc., please let us know through that form. And finally, Nancy is going to be talking about the forms for speakers and the form for faculty involvement.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh, and thanks, Andrew, and all the other folks working on projects. So this will be really quick. As a lot of you know, we sent out a speaker form a couple of days ago after our last meeting, and the form has basically a way for you to submit any folks that you would like to come and speak as part of our speaker series, like the folks we've had so far. And what we'd love is for all of you to sort of fill out that form so we can get an idea of future speakers that we can bring on board. And our plan is to have these speakers on a calendar, which we've also shared inside the Slack channel. We have a speaker calendar that you can sort of download from Google Calendar. And from there, if there's, we'll sort of periodically update it with speakers that we'll bring in. Hopefully we'll also be able to add it to the website as well. And so all of you sort of have an extra resource for your projects.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. And I want to remind everyone again for this last sort of note, please do reach out to your project leaders and let them know that you're in it and you're wanting to get started after this call. And all the project leaders, please reach out to the respective members of your project. This is super critical. We really want to get the ball rolling with these projects, and we're super excited to be working with you all. So with that, I'd like to close. Thank you so much, Milana, for joining. Thank you all presenters for presenting your projects. And awesome, we'll be here for questions for a bit. Thank you.